Hello and welcome. My name is Coinex and we are here at Coinex the producer. In today's video, I will be showing you how I process my snare drum samples. This is actually a continuation of the previous video we did on drum kit processing, which we focused on the kick drum. So today I will share with you how I process my snare drum, and I hope you enjoy it. Before I continue, there are a few things I would want to let you guys know. When it comes to snare drum processing, there are things to put into consideration. Number one, you have to understand the frequency range of the snare drum sample you want to work on. Secondly, you need to decide where to position the snare drum. Thirdly, you need to check if the snare drum helps in enhancing the groove of the project you're working on. So having these three things into consideration, then you now go into equalization, compression, and effects. So having said all this, let us jump right into it. So this is FL Studio and I made a quick laydown for the demonstration. So, as you can see, it is just a simple drum laydown: the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, and the open hi-hat. Or I will be focusing on the snare drum. Like what I said earlier, there are things to consider while mixing the snare drum. Now, the number one listed there is the frequency range. I always like to see the frequency range of the snare sample I want to work on. I will demonstrate that by inserting a frequency analyzing plugin. Span is a free plugin to read the snare sample I want to work on. So now I've captured the analysis. From what you're seeing, the snare drum has nothing from 142 Hz down to like 20 Hz, which is very okay because there is enough room for the kick drum to sit. That was why I told you guys previously that it is very important, very vital to choose your sample, to make out time in choosing the samples you want to make your song with. Now, from here, as you can see, this is a very beautiful sample. It has no much information on the low end, which makes it very okay and easy to work with in a mix. And as you can see from the graph, there is a very smooth roll-off from the high frequency, helping the snare sit nicely without having a harsh tone. And looking at the frequency analysis from the analyzer, it is easier for me to equalize and clean the sample because I now have perfect understanding of the frequency range of the sample. So we go back to the snare. The first thing I do is, I'm gonna turn off all this. The first thing I do is to apply an EQ. I try to roll off everything below 100 Hz downwards to create room for the kick drum and the bass, so that nothing escapes from the snare sample into that region, because it will cause clash and rumble. To achieve a better mix, you try to make spaces for every element existing. I do the same on the low end and as well on the high end, but I do it subtly. I do it carefully, judging with my ears. So as I'm rolling off the lows, I try to listen so that I don't cut deep into the body of the snare drum. That is too much, and that is not what I want. And at this point, I am very okay with the sound. Now, once these two areas are taken care of, the next thing I usually do is to clean the sample. I'm going to demonstrate to you guys how I clean the sample. I did it already in the previous video on the kick drum processing, but for the benefit of clearer explanation, I will still repeat myself here again. So what I do is I will just pick a point. While I am playing the sample, I will sweep through to find harsh frequencies. Once I get them, I bring them down. So let me demonstrate that. As you can see, I've already set this point, and how I did it was just to listen while I sweep through. So, but here, I don't like that, so I bring it down like minus 1.5 dB. I look for another point. I do the same thing. I don't like that. I bring it down also. So this is how I basically clean any sample I am working on. But I must tell you, take your time while doing this. Do not cut too much. Don't do like this. This is wrong. Just a little is enough to help tame those harsh frequencies in any sample. So once all these things are checked and treated, then I do an A/B to see the impact on the sample. This is before and this is after. So as you can hear from the sound, it sounds controlled, defined, and clean. Now, after the EQ, the next thing is to compress it. So I will show you guys how I do the compression. It's just the same procedure that I used when I treated the kick drum sample. So here is the compressor. Now I will play the sound while I treat it. What I normally do is I pull down the threshold, take up the ratio all the way, then I play the sample, then I play with the attack. Really bringing up this attack, I'm trying to get that point where the transient starts to be audible. Yeah, So when I get that point, I just bring back the ratio. Then I set it to test. Just a little bit of compression and I'm good. Minus 2.9. Yeah. Just to have a little bit of control over the peaks of the Snare sample. So after the compressor, I add another one, Transient Processor. This helps to bring back the lost transient, not too much, but a little bit, giving that strong texture, that sharpness, that punch to the snare sample or to any sample you use it on. So what I normally do is I use a preset, max transients. Then when I do that, I use the mix knob to set it to test. So this is how it sounds with it, without, with it. So when you listen carefully, you notice that with it, when you bring it in, I mean the transient processor, the texture of the sample gets rich, full and strong. After the transient processor, sometimes I add OTT, not every time, it depends on what I want to achieve. And also remember, the idea here is to show you guys all the things I use when I'm processing a snare drum and how I use it. So I bring in the OTT, and for the sake of those that don't really know what OTT is, it's an upwards and downwards compressor, a little bit aggressive kind of compressor, and I love using it because it brings out the sharpness, the brightness, that strong texture and punch in a sample. What I usually do is to bring up the depth to like 10, then I listen. That is with it, that is without. Yeah, it's subtle, it's not really, you can hardly hear it, but believe you me, it does something good. Then after OTT, I bring back another EQ, because after applying all these things, OTT and the transient processor, it pulls up the low end that we've already taken care of. So with the EQ, I just roll off the low and the highs a little bit, just to keep everything under control. Then after the EQ, I add an effect. I usually use Reverb to help make the sample more refined and sit nicely in the mix. So this is how I set it. Just go to the preset, I choose drum room, then I take up the low cut a little bit and the high cut. Now depending on the song, sometimes I use the stereo separation knob to widen the reverb feel, so that's just all I do. And I add little pre-delay. The pre-delay here, I put it at 26 milliseconds. Why I use pre-delay, I wouldn't want in a situation where the dry sample will be hitting directly on the reverb reflection. So I like to add a little pre-delay, like 26 milliseconds, which simply means that once the snare drum hits, it takes 26 milliseconds for the reverb to come in. When I set it like this, I preview the sample. in context with other elements to do my final judgment. So the next thing I do is to call in another compressor. Now I use this compressor to have a total control over everything that I've applied, and also see what's going on with the sample after applying all those things. So let's see. Yeah, for me it's okay. It's very okay. So what I did here was just to use the compressor to control the peaks of the sample, the Snare sample, to control the transients more. So after the compressor, the next thing I do is to position the Snare sample. So at this point, to decide, should I take it to the left, off the center, or to the right, but normally I love putting it like 11 o'clock, or yeah, somewhere here, a little bit off the center. So once that is done, that will be it. These are the processes I follow in mixing snare drum sample in a mix. I hope these few tips helped. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, you know what to do. But remember, the idea is we share the little we know to encourage someone out there, so that at the end of the day, we all will grow together. So stay creative, stay positive, stay safe, and stay blessed. Bye.